Well, we are going to do something that is, hopefully going to bring this in for everybody just to know that pivotal Black men who stand out in society for a cause ends up, you know, destroyed in more ways than none. So the first person on our list is, of course, Nipsey Hussle. How do you feel as though this ties into Martin Luther King?
Um, and just for the viewers, I'm more so gonna focus on the similarities between Malcolm X. I mean, excuse me, Martin Luther King assassination and the Nipsey assassination. There are some similarities with Malcolm X as well, but I think just to keep the show brief, and we want to get questions and comments really off this video. Want to interact with the audience on this one, so I wanted you to go off those notes that we have. So just give me the first thing that I mentioned that night.
Okay. So between Nipsey Hussle and Martin Luther King, it looks like they were both boxed in. What did you mean by that?
Right. Um, if you look at the Martin Luther King, examine the Martin Luther King assassination, um, uh, uh, he was actually in a different room, and he was actually moved to room 306. And not only that, you have the famous clip of Billy Kyle's speaking about when they got on the balcony, how he stepped to the side so they can get the perfect shot. And soon as he steps aside, um, the shot rang out. Consequently, Billy Kyle's was investigated because of that statement. And you guys should know that the King family did win their case, proving that the United States government played a role in the assassination of Martin Luther King. We see the same thing with Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey Hussle is in between two cars, and he has three individuals uh, pretty much boxing him in. The To his back is his business and a walkway, and that's pretty much boxed in. So for an assailant to come in, it's a perfect opportunity because there's nowhere for either individual, whether it was Nipsey Hussle or Martin Luther King, to escape.
Mm, that's true. So, as far as Nipsey Hussle and Martin Luther King, there were gang ties.
Yes, the obvious gang ties, which is most freshest to us, is of course the Rolling 60s Crips being connected to Nipsey Hussle, uh, along with the other Crip gangs that are regionally associated with the Crenshaw and Slauson area. In the Martin Luther King case, you had the Invaders from Chicago, which was a Chicago street gang that was there to provide security. Ironically, we see Nipsey Hussle being associated with Crips, Martin Luther King being associated with the Invaders through Jesse Jackson, and here the two entities that are live a life of gangbanging, offered no security and no protection for the two victims.
Mm. So, also between Nipsey Hussle and Martin Luther King, there is a two gun theory.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, of course, on the LA show was one of the first channels behind the scenes. Me and LA discussed thoroughly. There was two guns. I've already mentioned where I got the two gun idea came from. It came from A Million Hits. He was there. He reported it that there was two guns. Um, and now we still we have the Martin Luther King. So you have the one gun theory, which is busted because of what we know in the lawsuit. So James O. Ray did not shoot the gun that he was captured with, and he was Martin Luther King was shot with two guns. You have the perfect bullet that was found. You can see in the autopsy pictures right underneath his skin, and then you have the three-piece bullet that was broken into three different pieces. So there even though there's people out there, I won't mention any names, that want to still stick with the one gun theory. There's two guns in the Martin Luther King assassination, and both of these stories have the argument whether there's one or two guns in it, which is good for these historical uh, assassinations that create all this rumor and conspiracy theory surrounded around them.
That makes sense. So also between the two, no full trust in their surroundings or in their immediate circle.
Yes. Um, I'm assuming. Well, I'm not assuming. I know the LA crowd is an educated crowd from the few people that we've interacted with in the chat and in the comments. So you guys know the information is out there that there was some level of distrust, and I'm not saying any specific individuals, but there was some
Mm.
level of distrust amongst the community. When I'm
Correct.
talking about the community, I'm not going to just say just necessarily 60s, but you know,
Well, we
there
can
was some
say that because of that video that was surfacing of a private conversation being recorded of
right,
Nipsey Hussle. We can say that.
right. Also, we could corroborate that also with Black Sam's statement
Correct.
post assassination.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how does that tie into Martin Luther King? Well, Martin Luther King, if you pay attention to Martin Luther King's very, very, very last speech, he said in that speech that the only person that he could trust was Ralph Abernathy, because at the time he didn't know that also Ralph Abernathy had got turned also. Um, so there was distrust, particularly directed towards Jesse Jackson, because Jesse Jackson was undermining uh, the leadership and undermining the direction of the movement, and he did a lot of underhanded things, like on a flyer that they were coming to a city, and of course the featured person is Martin Luther King. What would Jesse do? Jesse would put a big picture of himself, and Martin Luther King would just be in the corner of the brochure. Little undermined things. And these things, that's a similarity that happened with Malcolm X. Malcolm X had the distrust. Malcolm X also had the gang, if you want to say Moss number 7, the gang connection as well. Um, he was on stage. I'm backtracking. He was on stage and he was also boxed in, for lack of better words, just to tie that up real quick.
Okay.
Okay.
So the next one is the multiple players.
Right. Um, I'm gonna say it appears when you line up the facts, and this is not going far in speculation, but there's a lot of moving parts for Nipsey Hussle assassination. You have the failure of security. You have,
Mm-hmm.
if it is so, you have being called randomly to a location, or something inspires you, something gets you to get to that location. You have specific phone calls, you have a tweet, you have people coming into play coincidentally, some might say randomly, all to one place at one time, and they all have specific and distinct actions that move in accordance before these things, before the first shot comes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to point any fingers, it's just what I see. And the same thing with the Martin Luther King assassination. You had to have the wild goose chase that Raul, the alleged CIA asset, to lead James Earl Ray on a wild goose chase to lead him up to be in Memphis at that time and be in that hotel room at that time. You had the invaders had to be standing down. You had to have the cleaning lady to come check the rooms late out of her regular schedule. You had to have the room change for Martin Luther King. Everything was in moving order, and all these different pieces came into to play for something to happen.
Hmm. And the moving parts. So that's also tied in. So then we go into who's the shooter.
Again, in all three cases, but let's just focus on Nipsey and Martin Luther King, you have the confusion of the shooter. What helped in Martin Luther King's case was the alleged CIA asset Muriel McCullough, who did the fake, who started everybody on the fake pointing, which is key in getting to misdirect everybody's attention from where the real shots came from. In the Nipsey Hussle case, everybody has to admit what you read on paper about what happened to him and what you see is confusing to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
You got the three-man, what I call the three-man mesh. We'll save that for another video.
Mm-hmm.
Other people like to focus on that same thing, and that thing that they focus on is very important.
It
But
is.
I focus on the three-man mesh. You got a three-man mesh. You got some strange uh extremity movements, hand movements, you know, the way bodies are positioned, especially at the time of the shooting. You have to pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to that. You have an object that falls to the ground that nobody, not even in the grand jury transcripts, even talks about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have this this mystery of
What's
who the
going on?
shooters, what's going on, and it's just total confusion in terms of people, especially if you speculate, and especially if you don't just line up the facts.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So that ties in with Martin Luther King. How?
Well, it's the similarities between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not putting a direct connection to the two assassinations. No, I'm just saying that there are similarities, and I think that certain people that are investigating like us, you can use these similarities as a template of investigation because it. I'm not saying it totally matches, but there are a lot of similarities and connections that can be drawn
Mm.
between the two.
We got some more. So security max. There was no security.
Yes. In Nipsey's case, you have heightened security, then failed security.
Correct. Heightened security, then failed security.
And in Malcolm's, you have heightened security and failed security. And what I mean by failed security in Malcolm's case, you have his own personal security, and you have the police that stood down or went to the diner down the street and had donuts. You had the same thing in Martin Luther King. You had police and standing down. And you can confirm all of these things that I'm saying by investigating it. There's several books that document everything I'm saying in interviews with certain individuals that were, like you have the guy from the from the from the fire station. You have the cab driver. There's a lot of information out there to confirm what I'm saying.
Okay. Knew it was bigger. Families knew it was
Right.
bigger than what it was.
Exactly. Exactly. Both families knew. We know in the Nipsey's case from statements from Black Sam, statements from the mother, um, that this is bigger than what the main, the mainstream story is. And in Martin
Mm-hmm.
Luther King's case, you have the of course the lawsuit proves that the family knew it was bigger than that. But even before that, you could look at the funeral procession in which uh, um, Martin Luther King's wife, shuns and refuses to, she can't stand to even see Jesse Jackson because she knew that he was part of it.
Mm. Wouldn't go into campaigns against their establishment.
Campaigns against their establishment, yes. Um, you see that um, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, towards the end, teamed up together. And one of the things that they teamed up together on was going to the UN to um, raise the issue of America being guilty of crimes against humanity in the case of Black Americans. Uh, the government, specifically Nixon and others in government was very, very, very um, concerned about that. Even if I'm not mistaken, Nixon has a statement saying that if any Asian or African nation were to even consider this, it would be a concern of national security. Um, Not to mention uh, grassroots program for education and employment
Mm.
and creating infrastructure for financial infrastructure for Black people in America. You had one of the, to date, one of the, you see these people had to die, and you see that the mold that people do or mold that people take when something happens, the form of protest that we use in this day's time isn't the same. Think about the bus when they boycotted the buses, when they boycotted Wonder Bread.
Mm-hmm.
That really made change. You see, um,
Mm-hmm.
people aren't rolling like that no more. Um,
We got to get
uh,
back.
Nipsey, in seeing with his vision that the city is about to be gentrified, let's participate in the gentrification through educating our people, through
Mm-hmm.
buying real estate,
Mm-hmm.
and building the type of things in the region that will support gentrification. But hey, we're going to participate in it.
Yeah.
Also, also you had in Nipsey with his international moves uh, through health, promoting health through the two nations, Eritrea and Ethiopia, which was perfect timing because they just finished the war and they're back. talking again, and people were moving back and forth across the border from Eritrea to Ethiopia, and it's a remarkable time in the country. And here comes Nipsey with being able to talk to both heads of state to heal that country, because these are two nations that are plagued with also HIV.
Mm-hmm.
So there's parallel there. You got one group going to the UN, and you got Nipsey reaching out to Africa, reaching out to two nations that were warring, that are plagued by HIV, among other things. Among other things, every now and then I'll find something. Boom, he was working on something else
Right.
internationally. Okay.
So the post-death replace theory.
Yes, the post-death replace fits in with all three: Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Nipsey Hussle. But Nipsey Hussle in a different kind of way. Um, Malcolm X was basically replaced with Louis Farrakhan. Some would argue that there was W.D. Muhammad, but I think in the way that the dynamics of how the nation was moving, uh, it was Louis Farrakhan. Um, Martin Luther King, it was Jesse Jackson. Even though he couldn't pull it off, it was Jesse Jackson. And Nipsey, is not that they replaced Nipsey, because we live in a different era where
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to replace you. What they make for you, when you're valuable and you die, you become an avatar. And I know that's deep and metaphysical to some people, but I don't really mean it like that. I'm not trying to go deep and metaphysical. It's real. It's we just, we moving from the organic and analog system to digital system. So in that system, when you die and you have value, you become avatar. They just digitize you, and you still make money. So
And I can
you're
kind of point that out with the new concerts that's coming up with Whitney Houston and Tupac, the digital ones, the holograms.
exactly, that's what I'm saying. You just become an avatar. And like I
Mhm.
say, like I said before, Nipsey's music, if you just see Nipsey's music in the first 24 hours, it's insane numbers.
Mhm.
Okay. So he's been replaced with Avatar.
Mm.
I know that sounds crazy, but that's what it is. They don't have to have. There is no more. There's not another Nipsey. Just like there's not another Tupac. But you can copy it. You can facsimile it. You can
Mhm.
digitize it, and people will still buy it.
Correct. Right. Very, very pivotal men. I can't stress this. Um, we really did break this down in the most comprehensive, quick, easy way. I appreciate you so much for using your brain with me, Sisco. I mean, you're amazing. Just the way that you let knowledge flow off your head. Um, I don't know how many brothers are out there like you, but we would like to get to know you so that we can, really dig deep. So we will be back with another video. Thank you so much. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel.